The Wall Street crash of 1929. By 1929, when the new president, Herbert Hoover, came in, the economy was still booming. Hoover had promised a continuation of the boom with what he called a chicken in every pot, and he boasted that we in America today are nearer to the final triumph over poverty than ever before. The poor man, he said, is vanishing from among us. Within 6 months, the situation was totally different. A lot of the money made in America at the time was on Wall Street, where they have their stock exchange. Earlier in the course, we looked at how people thought the stock exchange or buying shares in companies was an easy way to make money. However, because of overproduction, investors began to worry that prices and the value of their shares would topple down. So in September, people started to sell their shares. But it didn't really matter because the stock market took that and it bounced back and recovered. This graph here shows how across the bottom where the years are going up, the number of people who had shares increased, okay, and as did the price from here up to here. So it looked like it was an absolute guaranteed money-making scheme. But by late October, panic had set in. And on the 24th of October 1929, 13 million shares were sold on the Wall Street Stock Exchange. Now before, the banks had been able to come in and buy some of the shares because they had plenty of money and stabilise it. They couldn't possibly buy 13 million shares. In the days afterwards, not only were millions of shares sold, but their prices plummeted. So people were not making any money on the shares they still had. As more and more people started to panic, more and more people started to sell, and less money people got for their shares. Nobody now wanted to buy them because they knew full well in a day or so's time they'd be absolutely worth a lot less than what they just paid for them. By the 29th of October, people were selling them for literally anything they could get their hands on. This chart here demonstrates big companies like General Electric and General Motors, where before the crisis how much their shares were and how much they ended up being after the crisis. So you can see there a huge hit from 1.82 cents down to 36 cents, a massive drop. The radio from over $5 a share to 28 cents a share. And people lost a lot of money because of this. So what were the effects of this? Big investors lost really heavily. The Vanderbilt family, who invested a lot in the stock market, lost $40 million because of the Wall Street crash. Smaller investors who didn't have the money had often borrowed that money from banks and used their house as a guarantee because everybody thought they were going to get some money back from it. Well, the banks then came and repossessed their house because they needed to get their money back. So a lot of people lost their homes. A lot of investors committed suicide, as this man's done here, by jumping out of their office window because they could just see no way forward from the incredible crisis that they were in the middle of. Over 100,000, quite biggish in some cases, companies in America went bust after the crash because they couldn't afford the staff and nobody was buying their merchandise. And connected with that, unemployment in America went up to 12 million people. Many homeless people just built shelters in parks because they had nowhere to live. They had no house anymore and they had no job anymore. And there were famous stories of people like this man here selling his car simply to make some money because, as he said on his sign, he has lost everything in the stock market crash. So Hoover's government were taken totally by surprise for this. They thought the prosperity, making money, was just round the corner. But eventually they had no choice but to cut taxes, put soup kitchens on for the homeless, and the Great Depression, which is what this became known as, where people really struggled, affected America massively, but also spread to the rest of the world, and the Great Depression lasted for another 3 or 4 years.